Hi everyone. I think would be the lecture 22. And more than that, we have spent the whole 6 weeks uh, basically dealing with the property right. Of course, I spent the first week to introduce the law and economics in general, and I did some, site tour and do some other stuff. But mainly until week 6, last week, lecture 21, until lecture 21, I did property right. Okay, now we have a new subject finally in lecture 22, and that is contract law. One thing I apologize is if you follow the book, the property right is chapter 4 and 5, and chapter 6 and 7 is not contract law, it's tort law. But I decide to deal with the tort law later. It's involving a little bit of calculation and things like that. And to be honest with you, I want to postpone it to the end so that I don't want you to lose focus and have fun in the middle. So the contract law is a little bit softer, still tough subject, but a little bit softer than tort law. So I want to do the contract law, which probably would be chapter 8 and 9 in your textbook. Okay, so once again, I do the contract law first and tort law later. That is opposite order of the textbook. Okay. Here I wrote down already. I will do the contract before the tort. You might be wondering, what is tort? Well, you should wait for several weeks. The book has very interesting examples in front, and I think maybe it is better to think that example together, like the horse and mule case in the previous property law. Example 1. The rich uncle of a struggling college student learns that the graduation party that his nephew graduated with honors. So this rich uncle thought that his nephew is kind of not very smart, and he worried whether he would ever graduate college or not. But surprisingly, his nephew graduated with very good GPA, great with honors. Swept away by good feeling, must be happily surprised, the uncle promises the nephew a trip around the world. Wow, it's not just Asia, Europe, it's just trip around the world. Must cost a fortune. But later, the uncle reneges on this promise. So he kind of broke his promise. Renege. I didn't really know the word, but that is like broke the promise. Something. The student sues. Oh my God. So the uncle is not a good person because he broke the promise. And the nephew is not so good either because the student nephew sue his uncle, asking the court to compel the uncle to pay for a trip around the world. What do you think? It's obvious, it's a fact that the uncle promised a trip around the world. And it's a fact that the uncle changed his mind. Should the uncle and the student, the nephew, strongly want the original contract to be performed? Should the uncle pay for the trip? What do you think? Let's consider it from the old school point of view. What do you mean old school? In my interpretation, old school is before the law meets economics. So law and economics began relatively recently. I think the history is like 50, 60 years. So 60 years ago, there's no field called law and economics. Actually, in Korea, there are not so many law and economics courses either. So, law and economics is relatively new. And before the legal system people get to know economics, what was the standard they had to enforce the contract? So the question here is, people make promise, and the formal written promise is contract. If you think about that, contract is very grown-up rich person meet each other and sign something, but basically contract is a promise. And this nephew and the rich uncle promise something. Oh, do you want to go to the around the world trip? Oh, thank you, uncle. So that was at least a verbal promise. And this verbal promise is it effective as a contract? That is the question. More importantly, when people make a promise and break it, okay, April Fool's Day, you lie a lot, and of course it turns out to be lie. I mean, then if you report to the police should visit every these broken promise cases, and police should do something. So contract is a promise, but why do we need a contract law? Because when someone break the promise, break the contract law asks government, police, the judge, whoever it is, enforce the contract. Or they don't have to. So this is basically the question, this is effective contract or not, means whether the government should enforce the rich uncle to perform keep the promise, or government doesn't have to, so that the uncle is free to break the promise. The contract in old school has 3 components, and according to old school, these 3 components are and. If one of these 3 is not satisfied, then the contract is not effective. The government does not have to force that contract. The first element is offer. Here, the uncle said, oh, I will offer you trip around the world. That is an offer. Do you want to go to a trip around the world? I'll pay for it. Acceptance? The nephew. Thank you, uncle. I really appreciate it. I will definitely go. That is acceptance. So somebody offered, the other person accepted, but that's not enough. According to this old school legal system, there should be a consideration. What is consideration? Consideration makes the promise enforceable. So here, offer and acceptance is just verbal. Okay? And consideration is the uncle say, trip around the world. The nephew said, thank you, I will go. And if the nephew give a $1 to the uncle, thank you, something like that. Or, thank you, uncle, I'll give this souvenir of the university I graduate to you because I am very thankful. So something substantial, even though very small value it may be, was given from nephew to the uncle. Then in old school, the contract become effective. It's not only verbal, something was given. That is consideration. So someone say 1 grain of rice, 1 grain of salt. So in old days, when you have a contract, make a verbal promises, If you want to make the contract effective, you give him a 1 grain of rice. Then the law would enforce it. If you don't, the law would not. What do you think? The grain of rice or just $1, that is, and make it, break it, decision maker? The economist point of view, that's just stupid. Okay? So here in our previous example, if the nephew didn't give anything, just say, oh, thank you very much, I'll definitely go. Then according to the old school, it is not a contract. The nephew would lose. Well, maybe trip around the world is important for the nephew, but not so much for the society. But something very similar is very important for school like Yonsei University. We have a very rich graduate, CEO Lee, okay? One of our students, Mr. Lee, became very rich. And Yonsei University want to build a building. And Mr. Lee said, oh, please go ahead. I will donate $10 million for you so that you can build a good building, new building. Thank you, sir. But can you give me $10 million right now? And usually when Mr. Lee says, oh, I have like so many, like I have $1 billion. However, they are not in cash. They are in the stock market, they are in real estate. So if I sell them in a hurry, I cannot sell them in a right price. So I know that when you build a building, it usually takes 1 year. So I promise you, when you proceed with the building, after 1 year, I'll sell my real estate, I'll sell my stock, and I'll definitely give you $10 million for the building. If you do not believe Mr. Lee, you will wait. The school may say, okay, if you just don't give us the cash, we don't believe you, so we cannot build the building. But then, this building is very urgently needed. So, Mr. Lee said, oh, that's just stupid. You need this building so urgently, and you know I'm a rich guy. I will just give you the money 1 year later. That has no problem. If you are a president, are you going to proceed with the building or not? Everything depends on. So what is the problem with the president of university to just accept Mr. Lee's statement? Obviously, Mr. Lee offers, I'll give you $10 million. It's an offer. Acceptance? The president says, university says, thank you very much. We'll accept the money and build a new building. But Mr. Lee may change his mind, like the uncle. Of course, the university can give Mr. Lee a souvenir or something, but then, Mr. Lee would be offended. So Mr. Lee said, okay, I will sign a contract, which definitely say, I'm going to give you $10 million in a year. But if that contract is not effective, and as the university worries, Mr. Lee changes his mind, then the university build a building, but it does not have $10 million, so it would have a huge debt. So what is needed in this case is government guarantees that, okay, this is effective contract. So if Mr. Lee changes his mind, we are going to force, by law, Mr. Lee to pay $10 million. Of course, most of the donors of the university keep their promises, but surprisingly, some of them are not. But then it's totally understandable they cannot pay the cash in front because they definitely need time to sell their asset to bring in those $10 million. So if the government enforce, okay, I will guarantee to get $10 million from Mr. Lee if Mr. Lee, even though Mr. Lee changed his mind. So university, you don't have to worry about it. Proceed. If that is guaranteed, the university would be happy to begin the building. Mr. Lee would be happy to see the building constructed, even though he pay in a year. So everybody would be happy. So the whole point is the consideration from economics point of view is not necessary. As long as it was genuinely offered and genuinely accepted, then the government should enforce it. That's new school. And we are gonna talk more about that. Next example. It's related to confusion. Let's read it together. One neighbor offers to sell a used car to another for $1,000. The buyer gives the money to the seller, and the seller gives the car keys to the buyer. To her great surprise, the buyer discovers that the keys fit the rusting Chevrolet in the backyard, not the shiny Cadillac in the driveway. So the thing is, there's one female who is a neighbor, and the neighbor said, "Oh, do you want to buy my used car?" And she looked at she knew that, the neighbor always drive the shiny Cadillac, and which is very expensive, probably $2,000. But my God, he's selling it at $1,000. So she is so happy to buy it. But then she forgot to ask whether it's a Cadillac or not. But it turns out she never saw it, but at the backyard there is a very old Chevrolet, which is probably $500. She would never pay $1,000. And the owner says, "Oh, I didn't mean Cadillac. I meant this Chevrolet. And I'm happy that you pay $1,000. And the seller is equally surprised to learn that the buyer expected a Cadillac. And he might say, "Oh, I feel so offended. Cadillac at $1,000? Do you think I'm crazy or something?" The buyer asks the court to order the seller to turn over the Cadillac. Now, the neighbor who bought the car, says, "No, I definitely bought the Cadillac, so I want the Cadillac, not the Chevrolet." What would you do? This means, there was offer, there was acceptance. Are you gonna pay me $1,000 for the car? And neighbor said, "Yes, I will pay $1,000. Give me the car." So there is an offer and acceptance, and even money was given. So even consideration, even though the economists do not really emphasize it, don't think it's a valid one, but anyway, consideration. So it has all the component as a wholesome contract. However, so in principle, the government should enforce it. But here, there's a confusion whether the product was cheap Chevrolet or expensive Cadillac. So one of the big questions regarding the contract law is, okay, if it's a valid contract, the government should enforce it. But there are some exceptional cases the government shouldn't. And does this fall into the case that government should enforce it or government shouldn't enforce it? We'll see, but this is the case, typical case that, of course, we do not know the detail, but as the sentence itself, if the buyer and seller is innocently misunderstand each other, the solution is it should not be enforced. Reality, it's not that simple. Why? Think about that. Like the neighbor, let's say Jane, has another very good deal. She can purchase some other car at 1,000. She can purchase another Cadillac at 1,200. But then she found out, oh, this Cadillac is only 1,000. So she gave up that 1,200 Cadillac, even though it was a very good deal. She came here and it turns out it was not Cadillac and Chevrolet. But then naturally she would be upset. I mean, it's not because I'm giving you money 10,000, 1,000 and get it back. It's not that simple. Because of this misunderstanding, I missed a good deal of $1,200 Cadillac. And she hurriedly went there and the Cadillac is already sold. So if this 1,000 Cadillac was not misunderstood, she could have purchased a 1,200,000 Cadillac, which is also a very good deal, but she lost that chance. So things get complicated when there is a problem with contract. So this is confusion, but on the face of this example, the easy, simple, without thinking too much answer would be, this is very hard to enforce this contract. Actually, I spent the last 2 months doing something like this, nullifying the contract. We have so many exchange students who came to Yonsei, pay Yonsei the money, and pay the dormitory, and who is already here or who want to come here, but then there is a coronavirus situation. So they say, oh, now I want to go back to my country. I don't want to stay abroad when corona infection is so widespread. So they want to go home. So obviously this American student has a contract with Yonsei University to stay here for the spring semester. And according to the contract, she cannot or he cannot cancel it in March. It's too late. But think about that. It's a corona situation and the government say it's really a disaster, things like that. Should the government say, come on, the American student, you promise, you signed the contract with Yonsei University, so you should pay, you should stay. Or if you don't want to stay, Yonsei would not pay back your money. Well, to be honest with you, we Yonsei University paid everything back. No penalty. We say, it's inevitable. It's not the student fault. We totally understand. Because we have some student, Yonsei student, Korean student, go to Europe and America. The same situation happened. Okay, they want to return. And we ask them nicely. Of course, our student may contract with you to stay in London for 6 months. But then, because it's Corona, he or she want to come back. Can you nullify the contract and give all the money back to him or her so that they can come back? So there are many cases contract cannot should be enforced, but complicated. So I don't know whether if the Yonsei University say we insist we cannot return the money. Maybe we would go to the court with the American student whether the money should be returned or not when the exchange student changed his mind because of coronavirus. But luckily, we don't have to go to the court. We returned everything. But those things happen more often than you may ever think. The third example, it's interesting. I want to really share it with you. It's a deception. There was a farmer in response to a magazine advertisement for a sure means to kill grasshoppers. You know, grasshoppers, they eat everything, and the farmer always got a great damage from grasshoppers. And the advertisement says, oh, if you purchase this thing at the only $25, it can kill all the grasshoppers. So he receives in the mail, but then surprisingly, there are two wooden blocks. You mean blocks? Like brick block? And with the instruction, place the grasshopper on block A and smash it with block. Oh, it's not block B. Come on, I mean, if you catch the grasshopper already, you can squeeze your hand, but then you use the two blocks and kill it. Of course, you can kill it, but it is just joke. Actually, this is cheating. The buyer asked the court to require the seller to return the $25 to pay and to pay $500 in punitive damage. Whether it's just plank or deception, I think the money should be returned, because obviously, I think what's the difference between previous case? In the previous case, both neighbor misunderstand something. The one neighbor thought that she was getting Cadillac. The other neighbor thought he is selling Chevrolet. So it's misunderstanding on both sides. Here, I don't think the seller of these two wooden blocks misunderstand anything. He just knew that it's absurd, but he just cheated. So when somebody didn't misunderstand and cheated, and this thing happened, of course the money should be returned. And this punitive damage, what does that mean? Means, it's these cheaters, they are not always captured. I mean, you pickpocket someone, you pickpocket 10 times, the chances are you never get caught by police. If you pickpocket 100 times, maybe you caught once. So each and every time, 100 times, you got $10. So now you have $1,000, but you caught only once. So if the police say, oh, you pickpocketed $10, so return the $10. Would you be a pickpocketer? Yes, because on average, you do 100 times, and whenever you make $1,000, you get caught and return only $10. So punitive damage means, even though this guy cheated once here for $25, but pretty sure he cheated much more time, only he was never caught. So in order to prevent this decepting, cheating, deceiving behavior, we have to punish him with charging more money than the actual damage. Okay, that is punitive damage. We are going to talk about that too. But anyway, don't buy a grasshopper killing instrument and $25, even though you see the advertisement in the magazine. Okay, this is an introduction of contract law, and we are gonna continue the real contract law theory in lecture 23, next lecture. Thank you.